All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the session. Thank you for coming in. Woo-hoo! Hopefully you can all hear me and see me. And what I need to do is hit this button here. Sorry, there's too many things going on here. Okay, so I think that is, all right. Okay, so we should be live on Crowdcast. And we should be live streaming to Facebook as well. Anyway, we'll see what happens. All right. Okay, fantastic. Just a couple of things to start. If you do lose video or audio, the first thing to do is hit refresh on your browser. Excuse me, and then I will, that will probably fix it. And if not, I'll keep half an eye on the chat here. And if it goes down, there's other things I think I can do just to revive the feed. Okay, so here we are. Yeah, if you can't see me, go ahead and try and hit refresh on your browser or close and log in again. Okay, so I'm going to try to sort of tear myself away from the very lovely chat with everyone. I just want to start by saying thank you, everyone, for joining me here. It's just so wonderful to be here with you all. You know, I put this call out. I thought I'd get, you know, my sessions tend to be sort of long and a little bit on the nerdy side. So I was like, you know, I'll get in, you know, like 15 or 20 people in. I think at this point, probably over 500 people have signed up. There's a couple of hundred of you on here live. And I just want to say hello, welcome, and thank you. I'm very moved by the response. I welcome you all in. And, you know, above all, I just want to say that I am, I'm honored to be with you here in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty. And I really do look forward to sharing time with you in our sacred space together today. Okay. Now, a couple things to start here. I just want to give you just a quick thumbnail of how the session will go. I haven't set the sacred space yet, but after I set it, we'll be in sacred space. We'll go for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. There will be a replay available if you want to come back and watch later, if you need to get called away or whatever. But in general, you know, even though even in in-person sacred space sessions, what I tell people is come and go as you please. You can check your phone. This sort of no expectation of participation holds in person and also online. So if you're, you know, if you got your earbuds in and you're like doing the dishes listening to this live session, that's okay. If you pop in and out, if you leave, come back, watch the replay later. If you never watch the replay, that's okay. Okay, so so basically the deal here, right, is if it's not clear, is that I am here for you. You don't have to be here for me, right? I am here for you to hold this space, and you just kind of come in and out as you please. Obviously, be nice to each other, be nice in the chat, and all that other stuff. So what I want to do is I want to start by explaining the sort of quick thumbnail version of what sacred space is. You have in the pre-video. You can watch it again later, but I'll give you a quick thumbnail version. Then I'll set sacred space for all of us together in our live session, you know, which will apply if you watch in the replay as well. And then I want to sort of take a little bit of time to make some comments just from my own reflections, you know, not authoritative, just as one human to another. Some comments that on reflections that I've had on the overall situation on the planet that we've all been facing. And we'll take a little time for those comments. Then there's a bunch of questions that have been posted ahead of time. Thank you for doing that. I had a chance to read some of those. I prepared some sort of thoughts on those. So we'll have maybe a period where I sort of answer or speak to those questions. And generally, I think the way the flow will go is that there are a ton of questions already. I probably won't be able to answer any new questions that are posted during the session. But what I'll do is at the end, I'll put up a link for you to sign up for the next session, which I've put on the calendar for this coming Sunday. So just in 4 days, I'm not going to make everyone wait a week. Again, the same thing, free, open to everyone. And as you have reflections on what we discuss in this session, I encourage you to take notes if you want. And then if you have questions, post the questions in the next session, right? So we'll have this continuous flow of session after session where things that come up for you here, you post for the next session and we'll discuss there and carry on from there. As long as people feel it's useful and nourishing and a source of comfort to them. Okay, so that's the question. And yes, this will be available for viewing later. I'm not sure why it's freezing. But yes, we will. Okay, so after the question section, we will talk about, we talked in the previous video about ways to do sacred space on your own as an individual. There are also ways to do sacred space in a group. We won't do all of them here. It will be like a 6-hour session. But I will sort of, after the question area, it's what we'll do is I'll talk about the different ways of doing sacred space in a group that then, with you and in sort of your private family, Zoom groups or other things like that, you can think about doing if you want. And then we'll do one of those exercises together. And then that'll be it. I'll make some closing remarks. I will then close sacred space and send everyone on their way back out into the world. And I've never done a full kind of sort of session like this. I think it'll probably take an hour and a half or so, maybe a little bit longer. But we've reconfigured our crowdcast thing, so there's no limit on the people that can sign up. There's basically no limit on the length of the session. So we've got a lot of time and space here to be together as we want to be. Okay. So what I want to do first is I would like to give a quick explanation on what the nature of sacred space is. Basically, when I try to define what sacred space is, there is a distinction, right, between sacred and its opposite, which is the profane, right? So it's sacred versus profane. And it helps sometimes to define what the profane is first. And what the profane is, when I say the word profane, what do you think? You think swearing, cussing, bad language, naughty things, cheat deals in business, buying things in the back alley off the back of a truck, right? But the actual meaning of the word profanum comes from the Latin, profane comes from the Latin word profanum, which means pro, in front of, and fanum, the temple. Right? And in ancient times, what you had the fanum, you had the temple, the church, the cathedral, the temple to Athena, Artemis, what have you. And then in front of the temple, you would have an area called the profanum, which was basically the marketplace. Okay. And so, you had the temple, which was the sacred space where you would take the auguries, right? In ancient Rome, people would, gather in a sacred space marked out by by the priests, and basically, you would, sacrifice a bull. You would take the auguries and take the sort of guidance from above, from the gods, before every major decision. The Romans would do this, and the Greeks would do this before they went to battle, before they elected a new sort of consul or did any kind of major ritual, to make sure that as a people and as a state, they were behaving in accordance and flow in harmony with basically the divine. Okay, so there's always been this very sort of mysterious and nuanced relationship and interdependency between the sacred and the profane. The realm of the profane is basically what I refer to as a realm of fear, threat, and control. And when I say that, I don't refer to fear, threat, and control as a bad thing. Right? The marketplaces, what do you do in front of the temple marketplace? You buy souvenirs, you buy your gyro or shawarma, right? There's snacks before you go in or after you go to your service in the temple. And it's also the place where you would buy your sacrificial chicken or dove or goat or bull. And it's an interesting sort of, example or metaphor. So in the ancient profanum, I would walk. It was like a farmer's market, right? So I walk up to the goat vendor, and it happened with the goat vendor over this goat. But he would try to charge me. I would insult him. Just all the back and forth haggling in any kind of market, even around the world today. So I'm fighting tooth and nail over saving a couple dollars for this goat. Finally, we come to a price. I take the goat with my hard-earned money that I want to get top value for, and no one's going to cheat me, and I'm on my guard. I'm looking out for pickpockets, the whole 9 yards, right? And then I bring this goat across the threshold into the temple, into the sacred space. And the laws of the space, the physics of the space, the quality of the space completely change. Whereas once I was in a realm of fear, control, and threat, I am now in the realm of the opposite. Instead of fear, there's love. Instead of threat, there's nurturing. And instead of control, there is surrender. Okay. In this realm, I walk up to the priest assistant, and what do? I bow, I give I receive my blessing, and then I hand over the goat. No negotiation, no argument, nothing. I even pay the extra fee. I'm paying you to take my goat, right? That I was just fighting and cursing over in the profanum. And what the priest does with the goat is they sacrifice the goat. They let the blood flow into the mundus, the hole at the bottom of the altar, so that you propitiate the spirits below, and then you dress the goat, you burn it on the altar, and the smoke goes up. Literally, my hard-earned money goes up in smoke to propitiate the spirits in the above. Okay? And I'm standing there, and what am I getting out of all of this? Right? I mean, I'm a hard-earned business guy, traveling. I don't have a lot of time. I take all this time and effort. I'm haggling over the goat, and I come in and I completely surrender it and give it up. It literally goes up in smoke. Why would anybody do that? And the answer is, when you step into sacred space, you're in a zone of protection, sanctuary, but then also surrender. And typically, the reason you go into sacred space in order to surrender is to open yourself up to higher guidance. However that comes from. It could be flashes of intuition, insight, hairs on the back of your neck, hunches you get, or just voices from God, stuff your priest tells you. However it comes for you. This is agnostic or sort of separate from religion, spirituality. It's just, this is intrinsic to the human sort of animal, the human creature, the human being and soul. Right? There are always times and places in our life that we privately, formally or informally, declared or undeclared, we carve out as sacred, where we go to in our quiet times, away from the eyes of others, in order to look upward in a protected manner. Right? Because when I look up, I'm vulnerable. So I need to be in a protected space. And you take that higher guidance, however you have found in your life, it comes for you effectively. Okay? Regardless of religion, regardless of anything else. And so this difference, when you are in the sacred, you are in a state of being sensitive, vulnerable, feeling, and emotional. This is literally how you get the signal. right? You open up, it comes and infuses you and fills you up. Visionaries, right? High-tech visionaries, religious visionaries, whatever, are often, when they speak, passionate, inspired, infused, right? We say they're brimming, filled with enthusiasm. And without getting into it, what we basically mean by that is, I mean, you could just take the word enthusiasm itself. Enthusiasm comes from the Greek word entheos, which means in, like filled with, theos, God. So when you are enthusiastic, you are entheos, you are filled with the Spirit, with God, or with the divinity. And the thing is, in reality, right, in everyday, normal human life, you need both. Right? It's not just the profane and it's all money and transactions and I'm looking out for number one. You also need the sacred, where you take guidance from above on, like, what the hell you're even supposed to be doing on this planet in the first place. But it can't just be the sacred, because after you get that guidance, you need to go back out into the profoundum, out into like what we would call the real world, although both are equally real, and pick up your sword and shield and go out and fight the good fight again. Right? So you need both. Not to put too fine a point on it, but the temple itself, the marble, the gold, the stained glass windows, those didn't come for free. Right? The artisans, the working people who built all of that, they were paid salary. They work for money. They can't work for free. And so it is the realm of the profane that builds the sanctuary. It is the sanctuary then that brings down the insight and the guidance for what else the profane world should even be doing. So you need both. Both are valid. And the trick for me is not in whether one is better than the other. You need both. But the trick for me is in the cut line. What is the percentage cut line, proportion of how much in your life is sacred versus how much is profane? And for me, there's no right answer, right? This is a personal decision for each individual person. But what I observe is that the typical modern, industrial, capitalist, technological, liberal democracy, that this whole sort of trifecta of how we run the modern world, agnostic, right, ends up being, in the personal experience of typical individual, something like 99% profane and 1% sacred. And for me, if you are okay with that, then that's okay, right? Carry on, no action needed. If you say, no, I want to be a monk, I want 99% sacred, 1% profane. If that's the way you want it and you're okay with that, then carry on, no action, continue doing what you want to do. So I'm not coming here to lecture you about what your mix should be. I'm simply saying this phenomenon where there are these two different kinds of space, where the quality of the physics of the space when you're in one versus the other are completely different. And that there are values and benefits and validities of being in either space at different times, right? All I'm saying is that this distinction, the existence of these two spaces is a thing, and the distinction between these two spaces is a thing. Right? When you walk through the street and you walk into a cathedral, even if you're not of that religion, you feel the quality of the space is different. So it's a thing. And the other thing to say here then is that in general, in times of profound transformation, like in the time we are now, the most powerful reflex I personally have come to rely on, which is why I'm creating this extra venue of sacred space for everyone. So I'm biased. I do enjoy being in the sacred, right? The cut line is up to you, but I'm an advocate of the sacred. For me personally, the most powerful reflex is that even in the midst of chaos and action, to be able to create the circumstances where you can still, even for 5 minutes, right, to retreat back into sacred space, your own form of sacred space, however you found that in your life, however you may continue to explore and define for yourself in your life going forward, in order to refresh and confirm your sense, your own personal individual sense of higher direction and clarity of mind. Okay. And also just the rejuvenating values of being in sacred space, right? Just to be in a space, even for 5 or 10 minutes, that is not profane, where I don't need to haggle, I don't need to look out for my pickpockets or whatever. That is sacred. So even regardless of getting the higher guidance, because sometimes you go in and nobody answers the phone. And that's okay, right? You haven't wasted your time. It is good intrinsically just to spend a little time in a space that is devoid of fear, devoid of threat, and devoid of the undue control of others. And in a space where there is love, nurturing, and surrender. There are certain kinds of nourishment, emotional nourishment, spiritual nourishment, that can only be had in the realm of the sacred. And we'll talk about the different forms that can take, right, outside of religion or spirituality. And so for me, the reason I'm doing a session like this and a time like this is that for me, the crucible we are in now, within this crucible, for most people, 1% sacred and 99% profane isn't going to feel like the right cut and proportion. Or 1% sacred for most people at a time like this is just not going to be enough. We need more. And, this is my feeling. And if you disagree, then that's fine. Okay. So I'm not here to wag my finger at you saying you need to be more in the sacred or else. There is no threat. There is no fear. I'm just speaking from my own feeling. For me at a time like this, I need more airtime, right? I need more phone time in the sacred to be able to take extra guidance, to take stock and get perspective on just out in the profanum, out in the gladiatorial arena, what the hell is even happening, right? And also, I need more airtime and phone time with the sacred just to be able to recharge and refill my emotional and spiritual reserves, from the well springs of the domain of the sacred. And so for me, overall, there is no should. If you are at 1% sacred and you're okay with that, carry on, no action needed. But if you do need more, then that's something I'm here with you now, right, to try to help and assist with. Okay. And so in terms of withdrawing into the sacred, right, to sort of recharge that power, you can do that alone. There are all kinds of ways to do it on your own, and I talk about that in the pre-video, and you'll still have access to that later. But you can also do it together in a shared space with other people, in person or, as we are now, online. And what I found in my experience is that even though we're online, enough gets through where you do get that nourishment, which I was a hardened skeptic of even a couple of years ago, and with my own experimentation and practice with my own advisees around the world, I've they have pushed back on me, saying no, this is legit, valid, sacred space, and I'm like, okay, thank you for teaching me. And so the goal of this session then is to create that sacred space with you now, okay, and then spend time with you together in it now, so that we can all in real time sharingly partake in the nourishment, the emotional and spiritual nourishment that you can only really get when you are in the realm of the sacred. Okay. So the question is then, how do you actually do sacred space in a group? And what I want to do to answer that question is I just want to put up this slide image to help us talk through this. This will just be a quick one. So hopefully you can see that slide. So there are 4 principles of Presidian sacred space. So preside is the thing I run. I don't call it Artie, I call it preside. So this to me is secular, non-religious, non-dogmatic sacred space. I mean, you can use these principles and plug it into any religion or spirituality practice that you have. But the core thing that I teach is just straight, it's just technical. It's just technical, and then you can use it however you want to use it. There are 4 principles of Presidian sacred space. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see me. The refreshes. My signal is pretty good here. Anyway, we'll keep going, and then if we realize that there's a limit, I'll talk to the provider and see if we can sort of up those limits in the next session. But hopefully, at least this is getting out to replay recording, and then it'll still be available for everyone. Worst case, I will just record these ahead of time and post them as well. So one way or another, we will find a way. Okay. So the 4 principles. So the word preside comes from the word presidio or presidium, which means kind of 2 things: pre in front of, sidio to sit in front of. Typically in order to protect and defend. So to sit in front of has a meditation sort of connotation, but to sit and defend really speaks to that defense of the sacred. So Presidian sacred space, this protected sacred space, has 4 principles when we do it in a group. The first is confidentiality. Okay, so standard Vegas rules, right? What happens in Crowdcast stays in Crowdcast. Standard Vegas rules. And then for you, when you're asking questions, you can ask them anonymously. I think I'd mentioned you can go into your profile in Crowdcast, change your names like Mickey Mouse, whatever you want. Or in the future, email me your questions. You'll see some of these questions are posted from email. You email them to me, and I'll just post them from my user account. So you can say whatever you want. You can ask the uncomfortable questions. You can ask the forbidden questions that you're afraid to ask the people around you, because if you ask it, everyone's just going to freak out in your household, right? This is a safe, sacred space. You can ask those questions. I'm not going to promise that I or anybody else is going to have an answer, but even the space to ask that question and say it like out loud will often be, that feeling of love, nurturing, and surrender. And there will be emotional and spiritual nourishment that will come just from that as well. Okay, that's the first principle, that we hold confidentiality for each other. The second principle, and the way we do that, because it's online, is you anonymize yourself, right? It's not that no one will ever be able to see the video. The video is going to be out there. The second is that we hold space for each other, and basically what that means is we do not wield with each other the instruments of fear, threat, or control. Okay. And this is a more nuanced thing that, when I sort of work with facilitators to train them, other healers, it's like riding a bike. It takes a while to get a feel for it. But basically what this means is that, when we're in person, we don't try to fix each other. We don't try to offer each other solutions. We certainly can't sell stuff to each other, and I'll talk about that in the next point. We don't blame. The feeling is we don't use the word should, because the word should is an implied threat, right? It's like, oh, you should be more outgoing, right? And the implied threat is like, it's like, or else what, right? Are people not going to love me? So whenever you use the word should, it kind of pairs with this kind of motion. All of these actions, a long list of them, right, imply threat. And in sacred space, it is a zone of no threat, right? So even saying something like, oh, I had, I know exactly what you mean, which is just bullshit. I don't know what you mean because I'm not you, right? And here's this book. This is a great book. You should read this book, right? And basically, it's a sort of combination of threat and control, where it's like, I know all about you, so control. And here you go. Here's this book, which is an implied threat. If you don't read this book, you're an idiot, and you're going to continue suffering. Ha, right? And I'm going to come back and say, I told you so. All of that fear and threat. And basically, when you give someone a book and say, read this, I mean, it's in the dismissive tone, right? You're basically implying, go off in the corner and go like, fix yourself, heal yourself, right? And that dismissive, the power to dismiss, is also control. So here, it's not such a big deal because we're not, sort of fully in person, in proximate space. But generally, that idea of we hold space for each other. Uh, if you freak out, if you ask a scary question where that there may not be an answer to, we will hold space for you, where you will not be cattle prodded or punished for asking that question, because there is no fear, threat, and control. We're not going to tell you what to do, right? Because your sovereignty remains with yourself. I mean, after you get your own guidance, you're going to go back out there into the arena, and you're going to need to figure out your next move anyway, right? So, I mean, I can go on, but basically, hopefully, you get the idea. It's a space of hold. It's a realm of holding space, no fear, threat, and control inflicted on each other, right? So, rarely, unless I'm messing up, will I use the word "should" in this way. Rarely will I do anything where I'm sort of saying this is what you should do, and I'm wagging my finger at you, saying you better do this or else that, right? Because it's my job to sort of maintain this sacred space. The third principle is no commerce. No commerce. Okay. So I cannot sell you anything. Nobody can sell you anything, but I'm the one who's, on the screen. I cannot sell you anything, because any kind of a sales pitch is also an implied threat. You got to buy my hair tonic, right? Look at my beautiful hair. I use my hair. You better buy my custom Artie hair tonic. And if you don't, right, you're not going to grow enough hair, and people won't like you. You'll lose love, et cetera, et cetera. So, and here's a discount. Better do it now, or else you'll lose this opportunity. So, any sales pitch is just laden, dripping with threat, right? Do this or else. All great marketing is implied threat, and so. So basically, the idea there is that within sacred space, to the extent that I commit to you that this is sacred space, I cannot sell you anything, right? So I cannot. I mean, if something comes up and I'll mention as an aside, I do a program on something, I'm not going to go into extolling the values of it. This is just not the place for that, right? This is not the place for that. So it's a zone of no commerce, and then fourth is a zone of no expectation of participation. Now, online, it's fine. You can lurk, you can watch and not participate. The way this works in person is that, for instance, it may be a group of 8 people, and you haven't said anything the whole time. And then we have a coffee break. One will come up to you, usually with a name tag, and say, hey, Fred, you've been quiet. Why don't you come back in and sort of say something and participate? And the implied threat there is, like, if you don't do it, we're like all looking at you funny. Okay. And I kind of tend to go a little bit overboard with these things, but I take sacred space very seriously. So when I do these things, even in person, there is no expectation of participation. Right? I've had examples of people who are paid thousands of dollars to come to my retreats, and the whole time they don't say anything; they're just eating. And we don't even introduce ourselves around a circle, because if I start with you, this person, you're like counting, in 5 people, I'm going to need to figure out what I have to say. And that is this feeling of, even however slim, of threat. And even that we don't do, right? You come to a retreat, if you don't want to introduce yourself, you don't have to. If 3 days, other people are crying and sort of doing all this stuff, and you don't say a single word, that's okay, right? Because the point is, you are safe here, right? You don't have to do anything. That's almost the point of being in the sacred space. And I've had people who have come to these events who have been the ones who have never said anything. And they'll email me or call me, weeks or months later, saying that was one of the most nourishing experiences I've ever had. Because never have I ever been in a space with other people where nobody has messed with me. And I felt perfectly safe to be and feel and do, without hurting other people, obviously, however I wanted to. If I wanted to be an introvert, nobody messed with me, and I actually fully relaxed. In some cases, for the first time in my life, at least that's what it felt like. So these are the 4 principles of defended Presidian sacred space: confidentiality, holding space, no threat, no fixing, no commerce, and no expectation of participation. Okay. So as we hold space for each other and move into this next phase of the session where I will actually now open sacred space, with your collected manifold agreement, we will now set sacred space. And for the next hour, hour and a half, we will observe these principles for ourselves and for each other. Now, I can't see all 300 of you sort of nodding or not nodding. So what I will do with the online version, I will say, in the next few minutes, I will formally then open and we will all move together into our shared sacred space. And if you are not okay with this, if you're not comfortable observing these 4 principles of proceeding sacred space for the next hour, hour and a half with us together, then that's totally okay. And you are free to retire now and withdraw from the online group. And this is not a bad, there's no threat. It's not, you better stay in sacred space or else. There's no threat. That's the point. So if you withdraw, that's totally cool. No harm, no foul, all good. And then, after we're done, maybe I'll see you out by the goat vendor later, right? And we'll like have a latte together. Right. So the point is, even if you're not comfortable sharing sacred space with me, I can still share profane space with you. And we can still be allies and do deals and do all of that fun stuff. Okay. So it's not a sort of mortal insult if you are not comfortable sharing sacred space with us. So I will just give everyone a moment to be okay with that and stick around, or not be okay with that and sort of with blessing and sort of goodwill and good tidings withdraw from the online session. Thanks for that. Okay. So now then, I, on behalf of all of us, open sacred space for us as a group. So now we are all in sacred space together as a group. And the first thing I just want to say is welcome, welcome, welcome to our shared sacred space. Welcome, welcome. Okay. So what I'd like to do here is I would like to share some of just my personal reflections, not to be imposed on anyone, just my own sort of reflections from the heart on the overall situation we've all been going through together worldwide as a race, as the race of humankind. And one of the things that I've had I guess I'll just say for a long time now, listening to all the chatter in the outer world, I've had the feeling that there's been a lot of narrative in the profanum around a narrative of punishment or comeuppance or reckoning. Like, oh, all this is punishment for us not being eco enough, not taking care of Mother Nature and straining the environment and just being bad people, enjoying our technology too much, enjoying our capitalism, our sort of economy too much. I even heard a video where like 5G was blamed and the electrical sort of grid back in 1918 was blamed for the Spanish flu pandemic. And for me, just speaking for myself, I'm just like, even if that were true, the very strong feeling that I've had around all that is that narrative of punishment is plunging us even deeper into the realm of the profane, even deeper into the realm of fear, threat, and control. And for me, at a time of sort of chaos and fear and uncertainty out in the profanum, the most nourishing, sort of power refilling act for me is to come back more into the sacred, where, if possible, right, there's a narrative less of finger wagging and more of nurturing and of surrender. And I'll talk about what I mean by that. Can people see me okay? Okay. Okay, great. Thank you, thank you. Okay. And so the lens I want to give you while we're here in sacred space together is a contrast. Just like the contrast between sacred and profane, the contrast between the narrative of punishment versus transformation. Punishment versus transformation. And the quality of the two narratives, very much mirrors the quality of the difference between the sacred and the profane. The narrative of punishment is very much a narrative of the profane, right? Where it's basically the narrative of punishment is, right, here comes the finger again, right? Here comes the finger again. You idiot, you numbskull, you dummy, you greedy person. Even if you're like not against the sort of greedy capitalist system, you're complicit because you buy groceries and you make money and, blah, 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 shame on you. You did something wrong. And now you're going to get a whooping, right? I'm going to whoop you. Mother Nature's going to whoop you. God's going to whoop you. And the finger just continues on and on and on. And the instruments that are applied to you are fear, control, and threat. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, or good and bad, or good or bad. I'm saying that is one way for the narrative to go. And it is a narrative characteristic, right, of the profanum. The other kind of narrative, the narrative that is opposite from that, for me is not that, oh, kumbaya, everything's okay, because the reality is it's not, right? The alternate narrative for me is not the narrative of punishment, but rather the narrative of transformation. In other words, the message that we are changing. Something profound is changing. We, humankind, everything is undergoing a profound change. And not that, oh, it's a change for the better, everything's going to be okay. Not all change is good or not painful. Change is often incredibly scary and painful. But the point of the narrative of transformation is that, like it or not, this is happening. This is happening. And when I reflect on the quality of the human life cycle, the thresholds and phases that we go through, when you're a child and you transform into a woman or a man, and then you transform into an elder, all these different systems of like describing the different phases of life, I found that all the major thresholds and transformations of life are like this. All these transformations are involuntary, often terrifying, clouded in uncertainty, and not without pain and risk. Traditional, initiations in traditional cultures, when the boys are brought to basically transform them into men, there is non-zero risk. Not every boy makes it through initiation. The transformation from a girl to a woman, which is cultural but also physical in the changes that happen to her body. For instance, a girl's first menses, her first period, it's a transformation, right? Where it's like this change in your body is happening, whether you are okay with it or not, whether the society around you is okay with it or not. This is happening. And these narratives around these transformations is the key around, menses, around menopause, around midlife crisis for a man or a woman. The key for me of transformation is guidance, higher guidance that you ideally get from within your own self through your own sacred space within you. Okay, not from an outside authority, not from me certainly, right? But I'm just an assistant helping you with the tools for you to get where you need to be to sort of receive that inner guidance within your own self. Okay. But for me, the key for navigating through transformation is to find the guidance of like, what is the larger pattern of like, what the hell is going on with everything outside, and also what the hell is going on with me? Because as the outside changes, I find myself going through transformation too. Right? From the profane view, it's like, well, I can't buy the same stuff I used to buy, and I can't leave my apartment, and I can't go, drinking the way I used to go to, or whatever. But the point for me is more that these changes trigger transformations within us as well, and I'll say more about that. The key to transformation is guidance. Do you get the guidance of the larger pattern afoot? And then what is the narrative that accompanies that transformation? Is it a profane narrative of punishment, a narrative of fear, threat, and control? Or is it a narrative rooted in the sacred, right? Where the transformation is sort of characterized or framed in the narrative of ideally some degree of love, nurturing, and surrender. The example I always come back to actually is a young woman, a girl's first menses, right? Which is this, because we live in a patriarchy, is this like huge political sort of and cultural hot potato that is like misused by the powers that be to craft and control the narrative of what a girl is and what a woman is. And of course, you have cultures in our world where the narrative around menses, or a girl's first menses, and menstruation in general, as being, it being disgusting, unhygienic, hide it, it's shameful, don't talk about it, right? Or no narrative, right? Oh, no, we just don't talk about it at all. And one day a young girl realizes she's like bleeding from this part of her body, and she has no idea what's going on. She's terrified. She thinks she's going to die. Okay. Or is it a narrative of love, nurturing, and surrender, where it's like, hooray, welcome. We've been waiting for this to happen. You have now transformed, right, from a girl into a woman. This is the rising of your goddess power. There is the blood. That's the proof of it, right? Let me explain what menses is. Let me explain where babies come from. This is the wellspring of new life. This is this birthing of this power in you, right? Whether you actually decide to have kids or not, that's your choice. But this birthing of this power in you as a girl in our family is the birthing of a new power in our family, and we celebrate it and we honor you, right? Rising from your girlhood into womanhood, and then later into full matriarchyhood as a sort of, matriarchal leader of our family. The biological changes are no different from one girl to the next. But in each of those two examples, the narrative is completely different. The quality of life path that girl will have going forward, depending on the narrative, whether it's punishment or transformation, whether it's rooted in just the profane or rooted also in the sacred, those two life paths will be completely different. I work with probably 30,000 people at this point, online through programs, helping with healing, finding and following their bliss. I see this every day. The narrative is everything. So for me, I want to give this perspective then on everything happening in the world, at the meta level and also at the personal individual level. I want to give a little bit more detail on seeing what is happening right now through the lens of transformation, not punishment. If you want to see it through the lens of punishment, just read the news. All right, get on Facebook. Everything you hear out there is from the narrative of punishment and the narrative of the profane. And that's fine. There is a place for that. But for the narrative of transformation, I want to give you some frameworks and tools around what transformation looks and feels like, so that you can discern for yourself whether everything happening in the world for you and things happening for you in your own self feel like transformation or not. Right? And my point here is that I'm not finger wagging. At the end of this, you're like, okay, that was interesting, but I still actually see it from the lens of punishment, because I think, we've been very, very naughty humans, and God is now rightfully punishing us. That's okay. That's okay. But here in the sacred space, it is my role, my privilege, my honor, to be a little bit of, kind of an advocate for the perspective from the view of the sacred. Okay. So for transformation, there's three things I want to share with you. The first is, what does the pattern look like from a 30,000 foot level? The second is, how does it actually feel when you're going through transformation? And the third is, what the hell actually happens in a transformation? Like, so what happens before, after? What the hell actually happens? And I'll try to describe that in as concrete terms as I know how. Okay. To give you this thread to follow as you navigate through the storm. So number one, what is the pattern of transformation? The pattern is, for me, best typified by the image of the caterpillar butterfly life cycle. 3 acts, 3 stages. Caterpillar dies, goes into the tomb or coffin of the cocoon. Okay. And then rises, that cocoon turns into a womb, a birthing, a cauldron, a seed, an egg, that then gives birth to the butterfly. Now, typically when spiritual people use this metaphor of, caterpillar, butterfly, New Age people, et cetera, a characteristic of, what we call spiritual people is that everything has to be positive. Everything has to be rainbows and unicorns. So when they tell the story of the caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly, they're like, yeah, but isn't it great? Yeah. So the caterpillar's gone. That's okay. We didn't need him anyway. You're going through this thing, but it's all going to be all right, because you're going to be this beautiful butterfly in the end. So it's this like almost enforced positivity, almost this enforced positivity in the realm of the profane, where it's this threat, where it's like, you better be positive or else you will not be a good spiritual person. So think positive or else. Don't let any negative thoughts, be mindful, right? Or else. So I'm going to put that away. And when I look at the caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly motif or archetype, is that it's not all for the better, right? This is a transformation. You're a caterpillar. You're eating at 100 miles an hour. You're eating everything in sight. You're starving. You're ravenous. And you're giving in to your impulses and eating, right? Sounds a little bit like the modern sort of capitalist economy, if you ask me, right? And you eat so much that then it triggers a reaction within you where you basically die, right? That caterpillar, if you were to cut open the chrysalis halfway through, you wouldn't find any caterpillar in there. You just find a bunch of green, purple goo. And you would arrest the process because you've disturbed it. You've released the pressure, right? Which I'll get to in the next point. So this caterpillar dies, is in this belly of the beast, chrysalis, dark moment. And then eventually this butterfly comes up. But if you've ever seen a video of a butterfly coming out of the chrysalis, that looks like an excruciating process too. It doesn't look fun. And then you're a butterfly. You have to sit there vulnerable to anything eating you because you need to let your wings dry in the air. And then you fly off as a butterfly. And even then, that's not a very long life cycle. And even then, the life of butterfly has risk. And so my point is, and even if you love the butterfly and you're like, we're glad we're the butterfly, the caterpillar still died. You have still suffered a loss. The caterpillar is still no more. I mean, you've got this consolation prize of the butterfly, but the caterpillar and the loss of the caterpillar is still worthy of grief and grieving. So in other words, even though you're the butterfly, you're not free of grief and grieving, and that is okay. That is part of the overall package, the pattern, the channel. And it is basically this feeling of, it's just like menstruation. It's not about whether it's good or bad, whether you like it or you don't like it, whether the culture around you shames you or celebrates you for your first menstruation. It is happening, right? And the more you have insight into the overall pattern that this is a natural part of the feminine life cycle, of the female life cycle, the more you can perhaps take guidance and comfort from that. To know that there's nothing wrong with you, right? And it is painful. You get cramps, and there's nothing wrong with you. Okay. So when we think about transformation, it is this cycle of caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly. You can enforce a forced positive narrative. You can enforce a negative narrative. But the whole thing is every threshold crossing from caterpillar to cocoon, cocoon to butterfly, and butterfly and beyond is painful. It is not voluntary, right? And the eternal question is, if you were a caterpillar, knowing that if you keep eating at this rate, it's going to trigger this transformation, and you're going to go kicking and screaming into this cocoon. Your body is going to melt and disintegrate. And then, we hear these rumors of butterfly afterwards, but who the hell, I mean, who wants to fly? I want to just sit around and eat all day. So all this fog of war, you have no idea what's happening next. If, as a caterpillar, you knew in advance everything that would happen, would you stop eating? Right? Would you try to arrest the process and stay a caterpillar? That is the eternal question. Right? That is the eternal question. And there is no right answer. If you stay a caterpillar, you avoid the pain, and then you abort and interrupt the entire cycle. And so you abort and interrupt it. So what? Right? So there's one less butterfly in the world. So for me, I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do anything. I'm simply describing a state of affairs that is so. This is the cycle. These are the pain points. And, if you could decide, if you had any control or foresight, the eternal question would be, do I do this or do I not do this? This is the natural pattern I'm in, but do I try to sort of forcibly arrest it and break it? And it's like Christ in the garden before his crucifixion. He's like, last call, any way I can get out of this, right? And God's like, I mean, I could send the devil to whisk you away and not hurt you. And he was just like, screw it. Like, we're doing this. I got this. Let's do this. Right. And not to make this really, I could have used Jonah the whale. I could have used any other sort of mythical image. So the cycle is this. The cycle is terrifying and painful. Do you try to stop it? Yes or no? There is no right answer. Right? I mean, when you go into sacred space and you meditate on the cycle that you may be going through at a global level, at a personal level, these are the kinds of questions that come up. When you get guidance, it tends to be around these kinds of issues. No, we like what you're doing. Continue. It's going to be painful as hell. Sorry, we would avoid it if we could, but we need you to go through this shit right now. We can't even tell you why. Because if we told you, you might try to pull the emergency brake. We can't even tell you why. Just keep going, and we'll apologize. Maybe we'll try to make up for it on the other side. Right? This is the kind of guidance you will typically get, and you roll your eyes, and you're like, "Well, that wasn't very helpful." But it's still better than going out into the profane world, where any guidance anybody has is, go out and buy more toilet paper, right? And I'm not saying it's not important, but even after you've done that, there are still larger questions that need to be answered. And where are you going to get the guidance from that? Right? You're not going to get it from me, right? The most I can do is give you kind of tips and tricks on how to get it from not even within yourself, but through yourself, through yourself. So transformation number one, what does the pattern look like? That's what the pattern looks like. Transformation number two, how does it feel? There are two defining characteristics of a transformation: pressure / heat and containment. So it's kind of like braising a tough side of lamb or meat. Okay. You put it into the cooking pot, the instant pot, and two things are applied: pressure, the heat, and containment. You have to keep the lid on the pot, or the lid is forcibly kept and you can't escape. Okay. And when the thing is trapped, you, the world, humankind, and heat, pressure is applied, and there is an inability to escape, transformation happens. In the sort of typical example, in the cooking example of the meat undergoes breakdown. I mean, it comes out, it's still recognizable, but it's soft, it's fork tender, you don't even need a knife to cut it. And it's very digestible, it's very open, the meat has surrendered, basically. And so when you feel the 1-2 punch of pressure and containment, it's like ding, 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 you're in a transformation, right? So I feel the pressure of, my partner being a jerk, but I don't have containment. I can still go out. I can maybe have other lovers. I can do all this stuff, distract myself, bury myself in work, and then come back and still kind of, sort of carry on a daily basis. That's pressure, but no containment. Not to sort of rub salt in anyone's wound right now, but I'm getting a lot of messages from my advisees going like, I am in lockdown and I am with my partner and I'm with my family. And the usual things I would do to blow off steam when they drive me nuts is I would go out for a walk. I would go out for a smoke. I would go out and shop. I would go drive around. I'd take the weekend off. And I can't do those things right now. Sorry to hit a sore spot. Sorry. And so to me, again, I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's good for you. You should sort of take advantage of this moment and become a better person. I'm not saying any of that shit. I'm saying you got pressure and you've got containment. I'm not saying it's just like your first menses. It's like, if I could wave a magic wand and spare you from this, I would, but this is coming. And I can argue that this is good for you. You're going to be a woman. You're going to be able to have kids. It's just this wonderful thing. That's small comfort for you right now. So I'm not going to say kumbaya, it's all going to be okay. I will say there's a larger pattern. In the meantime, let me just hold you and give you a hot water, take some Advil, give you a hot water bottle and help you through the pain of the cramps and everything else. I can ease the pain, but I can say something about the larger pattern, and I can give you nurturing and love in the meantime. That's about the best I can do. Right? And then we will get through this. I don't know what form, I don't know what butterfly you're going to become at the end of this. But that's, there is a pattern happening. There's pressure and containment. And, you just sit in it. And what happens is you are transformed. Because let's say in that example, when you're with your family, when you're with your partner, and it's like you need to escape, but you can't because you're in the instant pot. You can't escape, right? What will happen is things will melt. Things will soften. The chemical bonds between you will change, just like the chemical bonds in meat, between the meat and the fat do change. They start to, I don't want to sort of pull this metaphor to absurd extremes, right? But basically, chemical bonds break and are reformed in a different configuration. And I'm not saying, oh, it's all for the best. I'm saying in many cases, it will suck, right? Shit will break. But if you are feeling pressure and containment, it is a harbinger of transformation, for better or worse. It is not a harbinger or indication of punishment. If you're in that space and you feel pressure and containment, it doesn't mean you're stupid. It doesn't mean you screwed up and like the gods are punishing you. I mean, you can subscribe to that. What I'm saying is you have an alternative. Right? And when a girl has her first menses, when a man goes through his midlife, it used to be called midlife initiation. Then we lost the narrative. We had no tools to help a 40-something man navigate this next chapter of his life. And we left them all out on their own. And now we don't call it midlife initiation. We call it midlife crisis. And they all flip out. So for me, it is this narrative of not punishment. You're not stupid. You didn't do anything wrong, right? There's none of this. It's like, okay, you're feeling pressure and containment. Let me tell you about this pattern, this caterpillar sort of, cocoon butterfly pattern. I'm not going to tell you what it is or isn't, but it makes me think of this pattern. I'm just going to show you this pattern. And then you decide whether it fits or not. But if you do feel like it fits, then it's like there are certain things, we can kind of figure out. I can tell you what else happens in this pattern, and you can maybe take it as your amulet or totem or lightsaber going forward on your adventure as you go through this cycle of, caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly, Luke Skywalker in the belly of the Death Star to Jedi, right? So that's number two. So number one is, what is the pattern? Number two, what does it friggin' feel like? So pressure and containment. Number three, what actually happens? What actually happens? And without turning this into like a 6-hour kind of session, I just want to share the perspective that when I do healing work with people, when I help people with finding their bliss and blah, 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 all that sort of life path stuff, the main thing I think about in terms of what happens during a transformation, you have pressure, you have containment, you're forced into the cocoon, and then what happens in there? What happens? I know it's painful, I know it's scary. The signal thing for me that happens is that there is a thing within you, a valid part of you that was suppressed, exiled, cut off from you, and buried, hopefully forever. That when the pressure and containment happen, this thing returns to claim its rightful place at the table, by your side, helping you navigate your life path. The part of you that's like, no, that's not me. Good girls don't do that, right? Good men don't think like that. Number three is what actually happens in the containment cooking pot of transformation. And the image is when the concrete starts to crack, under pressure and containment, the concrete starts to crack and the grass starts shooting through the cracks. This buried, literally suppressed, concrete paved over part starts to come back to claim your rightful place, their rightful place at the table. Not as a punishment, not as vengeance, although it will feel like that from the lens of the profane. From the lens of the sacred, it is coming back home to you. It is like the prodigal son finally returning. With the caterpillar, it is the power of flight. Right? I mean, the caterpillar is a ground animal, and the butterfly is a creature of the air. So symbologically, metaphorically, you go from a ground animal to a more spiritual animal. That's why it's like death and then the soul, butterfly, the risen Christ, etc., right? But with the caterpillar, it is the power of flight, the spiritual side. So to transform the caterpillar into a being of the air, I can't just stick wings on the caterpillar. The entire structure of the organism has to change. And when I watch these videos of caterpillar going in and butterfly coming out, it looks pretty freaking painful, if you ask me. Right? If I was a caterpillar and I knew, which is why we don't tell caterpillars that, right? But if I knew, I'd be like, no, that's okay, teacher. I'll just take a 0. Homeschooling is homeschooling an option? I'll just take a 0. I'm okay, not for me. I'll just take the shame and withdraw. So the thing or things that were suppressed in the world at the meta level, and the thing or things that were suppressed in you. The thing or things that were suppressed in you. How's the feed? I'm going to pause a little bit because I'm hearing people are frozen. Can you see me? Okay, so I just did a refresh from my side, so maybe I got to elbow to the front of the line. Okay, so hopefully it sounds like you can all see me now a little bit better. Being frozen, we're like moving in and out of sacred and profane. Yes, thank you. Okay, so to finish that last point, what actually happens in the cooking pot when things transform and all these things happen is that things that were suppressed come back. From the profane view, it's like, oh, come back for vengeance, come back for like, anger and sort of punishment. But from the sacred, things that were pressed out come back to take their rightful place. So for instance, and I don't want to go too deep into this rabbit hole, is when you're in that container with your partner and you're stuck and you can't escape, what changes, right? Maybe it was, I'm just making this up. Maybe it was for you, the power of your voice. Things that you thought but you didn't say to your partner in the past. And it's like, okay, we've had a long marriage and you want to rock the boat. And you push that side of you down. You're like, I'm not going to bring that into this relationship. I'll just shut the hell up and get on with it, right? Good girls don't say this. Good girls don't rock the boat in a perfectly good marriage, et cetera, et cetera. Now you're in the cooking pot together. And this voice that you have buried and exiled and said, no, we will lose love if I let you out, is saying, pressure and containment, baby. Pressure and containment. I think I can see some cracks in the concrete. Go, come on, this is our time. Let's go. And you literally feel to bursting where with your partner now, you can't go out for, you can't, do the things you usually do. And stuff starts coming out of your mouth and you have the blowout. And again, as we know, we're all grown-ups here, right? It doesn't mean everything happens okay in the end. You may not be together by the end of this confinement period. And I'm not saying that's good. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying this is the nature of transformation. The things that were suppressed come back to take their rightful place at the table, right? Not saying this guy's a jerk, I don't want to be with you anymore, but it's like the things that I have wanted to say, I'm not going to not say any anymore, right? I'm going to say them, let the chips fall where they will. And then if, we'll survive, we'll like get through this together, we'll figure it out. Or not, but I'm not going to not speak my truth anymore, right? The grass comes through. During this period, dreams will typically fire up. This is way too short, sort of informal, mixed group to talk about dreams right now, but all of my friends, their dreams are all firing up where they're being chased, home is broken into, you're in a car you can't control, bears and snakes are chasing you, trying to get you a message. And so these things that were suppressed come back to say, here's my card key, right? I'm a valid part of you. My card key unlocks every door in this building. And I'm not staying out anymore. I'm coming home. Not to be emperor, right? But just to take back my rightful seat around the kitchen table to make and cast my vote on our inner sort of board of director decisions on how our life is going to go, right? I will speak my truth and everything around us will adjust to accommodate or not, but I'm not going to not speak my truth anymore, right? To hell with that. As one of, thousands of possible examples. So those are the three things. Number one, the pattern of caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly. Number two, pressure and containment, what it feels like, pressure and containment with no escape. And number three, Gary, can you text me when it's frozen for you? I'll use you as my canary in the coal mine. Yes, frozen. Okay, I'm going to hang on. Okay. Can people see me? Okay. All right. So to recap the three things of transformation. Number one, caterpillar, what is the pattern? Caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly. Number two, what does it feel like? Pressure and containment. Number three, what the hell happens in that cooking pot? It's what I call, in one form, when you actually accept that part of you back and come to some kind of reconciliation with it. You can keep fighting it and pushing, but what I suggest, not this way, but I'm like, what I'll say, what has worked for me often, not always, often, is to come to some kind of reconciliation, detente, right, with this part of you. So what happens when you do that is what I call enactment, right? So it's like, okay, it's coming back. So we figure out what we're going to do. We come up with a compromise plan, and then we roll forward together. And then we continue figuring it out together. So three things, the pattern, what it feels like, and what happens. Transformation. Transformation, not punishment, as the alternative lens through which to craft this narrative. Okay. What is the pattern of transformation? What does it mean for you? Right? What does it mean for the world? My preference and bias is for, to the extent that you want to, you don't have to do this. Again, if you're like 1% sacred, 99% profane, and you're happy with it, carry on, no action needed. Right? There's no shaming or anything. Do what's right for you. But here, the natural question is, so what is the pattern? I mean, the general template is this caterpillar, sort of cocoon, butterfly. But a powerful exercise to do on your own, right, later on, when you're in your own personal, individual sacred spaces, you go into your own sacred space. You're like walking the dog, you're in meditation, you're taking a hot shower, whatever it is you end up doing to get yourself into sacred space, where you feel you're in a zone of love, nurturing, self-nurturing, and surrender. Where it's like in meditation, when I teach meditation, it's like, even if it's a sucky, horrible meditation, continue in it, because you want to surrender to the fact that you're having a crappy meditation. But that's part of the sacred space. I'm like screwing up in meditation, and I'm not going to do this to myself. And then you continue with your meditation. I mean, it turns into a good meditation after you do that, but that's not why you do it, right? You do it because you're not doing this like categorically, de facto, for those 5 minutes. Afterwards, you can still berate yourself, because the profane is still the profane, right? So when you're in sacred space, the question to ask yourself is, in all of this happening to me and around me, what is the transformation I am being triggered into? And you notice my hands when I'm doing this, right? It's not fear, poking, threat, right? Or control, okay? Or like dismissing you, control. It is love, okay? Two hands, not one. Love, right? Nurturing, right? And surrender. So you go into sacred space, you're like, okay, I'm going to set everything up so that like nothing is disturbing. I have strong boundaries. I'm keeping my sacred space. And then you surrender. And one example of a question you can ask is, in all of this happening, what transformation am I even being triggered into? I don't know. I have no idea. And in the shower, on your walk, eventually something will hit you and you'll be like, got it. Horrifying, but got it. And thank you. And you will be given the pattern. You're like, God, like Jesus, Mary, Joseph, why this? Why now? Why me? And you know why. You know why. This is part of you that needs to come back. And I mean, it will just be this wrestling match of a struggle. So when you ask for what is the transformation, what you're asking for is the pattern. What is my caterpillar? What is my cocoon? What is my butterfly? Often you have no idea what the butterfly will look like. You have no clue. Your friends might have a clue, but you'll be like, who, me? No, right? One of my best friends, years ago, he was the first person to call me a healer. I was a high-tech CEO. I was in the middle of like, running companies. I was advising him, and he was like, no, haha, Artie, you're a healer. And I didn't say anything, but afterwards I was like, what was that? And my butterfly ended up, my caterpillar was high-tech CEO raising, tens of millions of dollars from venture capitalists. My butterfly turned out to be a healer. The hilarious thing is, years after, I told him, you're the first one to call me healer. And he was like, really? I don't even remember that. So what is my caterpillar? What is my cocoon? Clearly, I'm going in the cocoon. The second question you can ask is, relating to this, given this pattern, where do I feel pressure and containment? Right? In what aspect of my life am I being cooked with no escape out of the Instant Pot? Is it with my work? I had a job loss and I don't, I'm not saying these things are good. I'm not saying, oh, it's good for you. I'm like, no, job loss sucks. It's awful. If I could wave a magic wand and get your job back, I would. But I can't. And now that it is what it is, you can frame it with the narrative of punishment. Oh, I'm an idiot. I should have saved more money. I should have done. Okay, that's not invalid. You could do that in the profane. And then when you're in the sacred, you make a different call. Use a different narrative, which is, I'm feeling pressure and containment around my job, around my relationship with my kids, around my health. Where am I being cooked with no escape? In that area you identify. And then you ask again, what is the transformation I'm being triggered into? What part, right? That next question then is, what part of me that currently I don't even acknowledge as being a part of me is now coming back to demand its day in court? with me as judge, jury, and executioner. It knows it's not going to get a fair trial, but at least for once, you will hear me out, right? I will bring you to your knees and you will hear my case where I'm not bad, right? I'm not the thing and caused you all this humiliation and loss. And even if so, I'm worth it because I am a valid part of you. Respect me, take me back, defend me. Even in the profanum, I implore that you defend me, right? And this is when you're down in the cocoon. It's not, oh, how heroic. You're in there slaying the dragon. You're not slaying the dragon. The dragon is coming back to demand its rightful place by your side, fighting with you, not against you. And the outside world will be, oh my gosh, that's disgusting. How can you let that dragon sit next to you? And normally you would be like, oh, sorry, what dragon? It's not a part of me. In the butterfly mode, post-transformation, somebody says, that dragon is disgusting, your answer will be mind your own business. Right? That's the proper answer. Okay, I'm going to do a quick refresh right now. Okay, hopefully I'm back. Okay. So what's going to happen is with these refreshes and freezings, this is, I've never had hundreds of people on the system before. I'll talk to the provider, but also even if the replay freezes and we miss, just ask questions and we'll hit it in the next session. Okay, so I mean, this is not a one-time thing. I'll do this in 4 days again, and we can come back to different points. So don't worry, I'll be here. Okay. So the questions to ask yourself, only if you want, is when you're in sacred space, what is the pattern I'm going? What is the transformation I'm being triggered into? What is my before, during, after? Where do I feel pressure and containment? Where am I being cooked with no escape? So in my relationships with my kids, with my parents, in my relationships with my lover, my friends, my work relationships, et cetera, my health, my finances, where exactly am I being cooked with no escape, where I feel pressure and containment? And given that, what elements are now able, because of the cracks in the concrete, rushing back at me, demanding their day in court? And we'll see some of these in the examples of the questions people have asked. Okay. We all do this. Like, so when I do healing processes and advise people on healing, this is kind of what we do all day long, right? But at a time like this, it's extraordinary, because at a time like this, the pressure and containment is hard enforced. I mean, when I do healing with people, they willingly go down into the cooking pot because they're like, I don't want to live like this anymore. This is like an absurd state of affairs, and I'm ready to sort of do this work and do healing. I'm like, all right, come on in. We'll see what we can do. Here, this pressure and containment is enforced by external circumstances, and it is happening en masse. It is this, for me, it is this breathtaking, extraordinary thing for me to be sitting here watching the events of the world unfold through my, lens of transformation, healing, sacred space, where it's like you're literally watching, the foundation stones of society, like spontaneously up and start moving around, sliding around the foundations of the temple, of all of civilization. And it's not random. I mean, there is a pattern. I mean, I haven't quite been able to discern it, but it's you watch things move, you realize there's a pattern. You may not get it, but you can tell there's a pattern. Okay. So when you do this, and you're able to do this, and Gary, every 5 minutes or so, can you just text me a reconfirmation that you can see me? That would be helpful. Because I can tell, I can still see myself. So sorry about this. When you are in this state of pressure and containment, the reason to ask these questions, what transformation am I being triggered into? What's going on? What area of my life is this happening? And what thing is trying to get back to me? How do I engage it? What does it even want? Right? The thing, just to tell you with relief, is that when the thing comes back to you, it is an intrinsic part of you. Right? It's not the devil. It's not like some demon or whatever. It is a part of you. You may paint it as a demon. You may vilify it, tar and feather it, put a label and a dunce cap on it and call it the demon, but it actually isn't. Right? It is a part of you. If it can tell you stuff in your head, it's inside you. It's a part of you. Right? And as a valid part of you, its interests are fully aligned with you. If you die, it dies. Right? So you can take comfort in the fact that whatever it's trying to do when it comes back to you, it is, at least in its own mind, well-meaning. It's trying to do something that it thinks will help. So the question is not of malice or intention. The intention is always good. The question is always one of coordination. So you're trying to do this. I think I'm supposed to be doing this. How do we sort of come to like some kind of interim compromise plan? So the purpose of all this is, in one way or another, beg, borrow, steal your way to the point where you can try to reflect and discern a larger pattern of what the hell is going on in your life. And even in the larger world, but I wouldn't even worry about the larger world. I'm just worried about you with all the pressure, all the areas of pressure and containment that you're experiencing right now, okay? And in the questions, we'll have some live examples that we can speak to. For many people, you know, often it was a path they were already on. I think one of the first questions, I was already on, I was in hospitality. I was on my way to being a healer. And now this thing hit. I lost my job in hospitality. And I think I'm being pushed even more forcefully into the path of being a healer. Not in a nice way, in a very painful and scary way. But I mean, all of a sudden, all these paths are closed. And the only path forward is to continue being a healer. So that is the transfer. It's like pushing you further into like your butterfly phase, if you will. That's just my wild ass brainstorm. I'm not saying that is the answer for you. I'm just brainstorming with you. You are the one that will know for sure. I don't know anything. Okay. But when you see the pattern, it is beyond good and bad, right or wrong, whether you like it or not. It's like menses, right, for a girl. It is what is actually happening and being triggered to sort of catalyze, to sort of start. And this is the question I would ask in sacred space when you are alone. Okay. What is the pattern? What is the transformation that I'm being triggered into? What is the pattern? What does it feel like? Well, I kind of know what it feels like. It feels horrible, right? And then what is the thing that's trying to come back to me? Those are the big three. And then there's a way you can do this and look out at the larger world and ask those same questions. I'm not going to do that here, but I'll leave that to you to do. I mean, basically, what you do for yourself, you can do as a lens for looking at the world as well. I'll leave that for you. If you do have reflections and questions, you can put them in the question section of the next Sacred Space session this Sunday. And for my own comments, that's all I want to say for now. It's mainly just to sort of plant the seed of that idea that the narrative of what's happening is not necessarily just punishment, but also there's an alternative narrative rooted in the sacred, right? Not in the profane, rooted in the sacred, a narrative of transformation. And some of the detail there I've given you hopefully will help you kind of, do your own reflection when you go into your own sacred space, right? Away from me, away from my influence, away from the influence of other people, under your own sovereign power and control. Questions to ask that I don't know what the answer will be when you ask them, but that's the point, right? I don't have to know. It's not my business to know. It's for know when you start to see the pattern of what's happening in the specific areas of your life. It can actually be potentially a source of great comfort. As philosophers, thinkers much more powerful than me through history have said, and I'll just paraphrase, once you understand the larger pattern of something, once you understand the meaning of why something is happening to you, almost anything is bearable. Almost any pain is bearable. The one thinker, there are many thinkers that have expressed this, but the one thinker that comes to mind is Viktor Frankl, who said exactly that sentiment about his time, in Auschwitz, right, during World War II. When he found the meaning for what this was happening, and it was beyond all this other stuff, it made his suffering, it made his pain more bearable, the difference between pain and suffering. So these are just thoughts, brainstorms to share, not this is how you should be thinking about anything. This is just sacred space and giving you extra tools to, bring yourself privately when you're under the protection of your own sovereign power into a state of love, nurturing, and surrender. And then when you get the signal that you get tools for helping to decode, the insights and intuitions that you're getting. Okay. So very quickly, yes, your anger and rage is valid. And then how you titrate it out into the world is something your entire inner board of directors will need to figure out in terms of an actual logistical plan in the world of the profane, because you will be punished for your tantrums. But the point is, to say they're valid, come here, sit next to me, let's figure out a plan. That's all it's asking for. It's not asking to incinerate the world around you. It's asking to sit next to you finally, again, recognized as a valid part of you. And then what you actually do, that's the part you get paid for, as they say, right? You got to actually figure that out and do all the blocking and tackling. But with this part of you by your side, not denied anymore by you. So now what I want to do is I want to answer some questions that have been posted. Usually I'll mark them so you can time mark them. I think I'm just going to try to blow through them as much as possible because we're already almost at the 2-hour mark. I'm happy to go for another hour even after 2 hours, but again, I'll keep going until we feel like we're done, and then you can come back in the replay. Just come and go as you please. I just want to make sure all of this is here for you as much as it brings you comfort. Okay. So some of these questions, let's see here. So question 1, can we share more ideas on how to create our own sacred space? And this person says, what I do to stay sane is after waking up, I do a 15-minute meditation, and then I pick a card from my oracle deck, like a tarot card deck or whatever, that gives me insight, spiritual guidance for the next 24 hours. The messages from the cards help me to stay focused on the positive and not lose myself in negative thinking, like punishment, profane thinking, right? Perhaps this gives inspiration. So, excuse me. So for me, that deck is a great example. Surrendering, right, to random chance to give you a theme or touchstone for the day. Other things that people have shared with me, taking a long walk with a little notebook if you want. Like I'll have a notebook like this and keep it in my back pocket because like writing longhand instead of typing on my phone will help me sort of bring more insight out when I'm in that sacred zone of taking a long walk by myself. Dreams and healing, I do a lot of dream reading with people. Dreams fire up hugely during a healing period, during a healing cycle. There are other ways of getting into the sacred. Meditations with the labyrinth, meditation in general, working with fairy tale and myth, guided poetry. We'll actually do a quick guided poetry reading later in the session if people want. These are all alternate ways of getting to the sacred. Happy to do any or all of these in future sessions we have together if people want. But let me know in the comments or on email what you're interested in. It helps me to know where people's interests are. The other thing I'll say is that, and I'll touch on this again in another person's questions, you already are in the sacred at different points throughout the day. We just don't in our culture have a name for it, and we don't bookend it. We don't put a frame around it. For instance, let me do a refresh here. I just did a refresh, so okay, it looks like I'm coming back. I just did a refresh on my side. My editor, Gauri, is in Bangalore, so she's like the farthest place on the planet you can be from me. So I'm waiting for her to text me back. Okay, great. So we're back. Gauri can see me now. So I was telling everyone that Gauri, my editor, is based in Bangalore, so she's like the farthest place on the planet from me. So I always wait for her. So keep telling me if you can see me, Gauri, and if you tell me I'm down, I'm going to refresh. So the thing I was saying was you are already in the sacred every day at different points. You just fly by it. Because culturally, we have no tools for honoring the sacred or carving out space for the sacred. Our society is 99% profane. That has its own advantages, I suppose, in the material realm and the economic realm, but it also has its costs. So some examples where you may find yourself to be in the sacred already, okay, is, for instance, in the shower. The average American shower is 3.5 minutes. And it is the perfect kind of thing for receiving insight, because as Americans, we're all Protestants. We have to work till we die. We have to be like sort of virtuous and have that sort of work ethic, right? So any longer than 3.5 minutes, it would be wasteful, indulgent, so we can't do that. Any shorter than 3.5 minutes, you actually can't wash every part of your body, so you're not hygienic and you're a bad American. So you have to have enough hot water in the shower to get it all functionally done, but not too long. And so within that 3.5 minutes, that is like a crack in the concrete. And typically, it's during the shower. People always say, oh, I got this idea in the shower. That's why the ideas come to you in the shower, because you are in this sort of pseudo-sacred space where you are safe, you're self-nurturing, and you are in surrender just for 3.5 minutes. So it's okay to be in surrender. The door is locked, right? And even in our culture, that's your 1% per day typically. You're in the shower, and then all these ideas flood you. You're like, I need to write this down. And that's why you think about things you could have said in this conversation. You get all the download when you're in the shower. Other places, when you have dreams, but there are very few readers of dreams out there, and we've lost our symbolic literacy, which is why I've been in my practice dragged back into doing dream reading for people. Your half awake state in the morning when you wake up and you're not quite up yet, that is like a shower zone, and stuff hits you then. When you're driving, right, you're in the zone where you're safe, you're in control, But it's like muscle memory. The car's practically driving itself, right? Which is why people feel like they can text, they can talk. When you're not doing that, you're not listening to music, you're just driving. There's a lot of open space that's just in surrender, and you will get ideas when you're driving. Okay, working out, going for a long run. Typically, right after the run, you're like done. You're not criticizing yourself because I just hit my mark, I hit my target. And for that like 3 minute period right after your run, when you're walking back to your car, nobody's criticizing you. There's no self threat. You're in surrender, and you'll get these huge ideas. Yoga, similarly. Now, these all count as incidental kind of drive-by sort of incidences of the pretty close enough to sacred. And these are when you'll get these downloads. I recommend that when you get these downloads, just write them down. Write them down, keep a journal. You will start to see over many sessions, patterns start to emerge as to what you need, as to the meaning and purpose in your life, as to the direction. Not in this heroic, like kumbaya, spiritual, positive way. You'll get things that are negative, that like you need to change, that you're like, hell no, I'm not changing that. But it's during the sacred that you'll get this higher guidance, whether you're even explicitly asking for it or not. Okay. Excuse me. So that's the answer to the first question. To this next question from Ali, a call to surrender or persevere. This is that example of job loss in hospitality, but you were kind of leaving that job anyway. And the crossroads you're at right now is, do I just get another job and get a cheap place to live and just hunker down, or do I go back, live with my parents, get them to help support me, and then from the shelter of that sanctum, which is not cost-free. I mean, they may drive you nuts. You may have no privacy there, et cetera, right? You may feel containment and pressure when you're back with your parents, but you will have this window of material support to sort of pursue your bliss. And so that for me is a question that you take into the sacred, right? And you journal, you sort of do whatever it is, you shower a lot to get those downloads. For me personally, because we have been in advising in our sort of weekly, I mean, you are one of my advisees in healing. I'll just say this. If your intuition says focus on your dream, that for me is the first priority. I mean, basically don't starve, right? Don't starve, but go after it. Don't starve, but go after it. Let me refresh. Okay, I am refreshing. I just refreshed. Okay. So for Ali's question, she is one of my advisees. So basically, don't starve, but go after it. So for me, and this is your own, you need to make your own decision on this. But my bias, and I am biased. I am biased. Okay, I am biased. My bias is that, if there's a shelter you can take from which you can continue moving forward with your bliss, whatever your bliss is, that would be my bias. I mean, if you need to like sort of be humble and ask parents for help and live with them, first of all, we're kind of under the cover of this apocalyptic pandemic. So it's like, it is the pandemic. So what are you going to do? So the pandemic kind of, covers a lot of these cases where it's like, well, it's the pandemic. So what are you going to do? And if you can't let the global apocalypse like give you at least a temporary hall pass, then there's a deeper wound healing issue there, right? I mean, obviously, right? So for me, my heavy bias is just do it. Take shelter with your parents and continue pushing forward on your bliss. If you need to smile and make up with them, whatever, I'm like, fine, do it. That doesn't impede your bliss, right? Working a job, with your chronic health condition that you are not happy with, that will, I mean, for me, it's basically which side will your bliss flow more strongly and with more freedom. And then my personal unfair bias is to go in that direction. But for you, when you go into your own sacred, you make it a different answer, and I would just follow that. Right? I mean, I would confirm it, but I would follow it. Okay, so next question: why is what is your take on why the media is spreading so much fear and threat? The media, very quickly, is in the realm of the profane. Right? The world of the media is fear, threat, and control. It's not a reason to piss on the media. I mean, it has its function in the profane society where we keep up democratic institutions. It's run through advertising. It is literally sponsored by advertising. And advertising commerce, as we said earlier, is itself, every advertising pitch is fear, threat, and control, right? Buy my Viagra or else you won't have as good a marriage, right? I mean, it's just fear, threat, and control. All great marketing is fear, threat, and control. So I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's good. Even Preside, right? Facebook, sort of online advertising channels is how I built Preside in a large part. It's how we're even here in the temple of the sacred space where there is no commerce, but commerce is how I was able to build the temple in the first place. So there is always this deep connection between the sacred and profane. And they lean on each other. They rely on each other in this very mysterious way. Okay. And that is okay, but the key for me is and the media has its place, and they're doing what the media does. They're like pumping out, barfing out endless rivers of fear, threat, and control. So when you're in the profane, you open your news and you like figure out if you need to buy toilet paper or whatever, right? What the symptoms are, how to social distance, that's all valid. But when you come back into the sacred, are we frozen again? How are we doing? Okay, I think we're back. So when you come back into the sacred, right, away from the media realm of fear, threat, and control, you have a different thing. You get higher guidance. So you can do both. Both is okay. You do need to follow media to sort of figure out what the latest guidelines are and all of that, and that's okay. So if you want to know if it's time to sell your stock or it's time to buy more toilet paper, great. Get on the news, figure it out. Call your anti-conspiracy theory friend and ask for all the latest scoop and gossip. And that's fine. That's the realm of the profane. There's a time and place for that. But I just don't know that it needs to be 99% of your percentage, right? On the other side, when you want the sacred and you want reflection on the higher meaning of everything that's going on, what it means for you, what transformation you yourself are going into, then it simply calls for a different quality of space, sacred space. And that's okay, right? Now with these tools, you know how to do that. So you go into your sacred space, you go for a shower, go for a run, and then instead of calling your anti-conspiracy theory friend, you call your other friend that's like always zen and calm and always says, well, what do you think? Right? Who holds space for you. And then over time, whether the split between those realms and modes of your life is 99-1 or 199 or 50-50, you decide that based on what feels good for you. Okay. There's a question here. What if a burglar kind of metaphorically, energetically enters your sacred space and hurts from the inside? I wanted to touch on that really quickly because that is a boundary question, right? So one of the things that will come up is like, I'm packed in this house. I have no boundaries. Everyone's like in everybody else's space. And for some people, to get sacred space, they can escape and walk the dog. For other people, in this period of pressure and containment, the only possible way, you're cornered. And at the end of the day, the only possible way to get sacred space, to hold and maintain that boundary, is to set a boundary. You physically don't move and you just have to set a boundary. And it's like, I need 10 minutes alone with the door closed and nobody disturbing me. And if you're not used to setting that boundary, within 30 seconds, they'll be knocking on the door. And you will need to take a different behavior from what you used to take, which is, I'm sorry, but I said I need 10 minutes, no interruptions, hold it, and I will come attend to you afterward. Right? And look, I don't want to get into a fight right now, but I need you to honor my boundary for the next 10 fucking minutes if you don't fucking mind. And so when you realize you're in that space of pressure and containment, okay, and you are pushed, your back is up against the wall to come up with that power of maintaining the boundary, you feel the pressure and containment. And the thing that was exiled, that comes back to take its rightful place by your side, is your power of maintaining boundaries with other people. Right? With no more escape, you can't leave the house anymore. The only way to keep your own sacred space or even sanity, some measure of privacy and dignity, is for you to say, oh, no, I'm a good girl. I don't, I please other people. I'm always available. I can't say no to people. I'm a people pleaser. And it's like this dragon that is there to like defend you, that you've pushed down and buried, blasts up through the concrete. It's not a blade of grass, it's a dragon. And eventually you crack and stuff starts coming out of your mouth where you are basically ripping the throats out of everyone around you, energetically, kind of, emotionally, sort of just boundary, socially. Not literally, hopefully, right? And everyone's like, whoa, what is this, the real you? It's like, yeah, it is the real me. Deal with it. Right? And that is an example of a transformation where you get back this power. In healing, we call it power of the inner masculine, inner feminine. We all have it regardless of gender. Your inner masculine comes back as a Rottweiler, and once your Rottweiler is next to you, everyone can see it. They don't need to like poke you to the point where the Rottweiler attacks me for me to know that you have a Rottweiler. I give you space. I respect your boundaries. That's it. And you are now in your butterfly phase. As one example. This question, how to configure the right ratio of sacred and profane in one's life. So just really quickly, what I want to say about, and you can all in the replay, like reread the questions in detail if you want. But for me, just to answer your question directly, if you want to gorge on the sacred and go like 99% sacred for a while, just for the hell of it, because it feels good, I think that's okay. Because these things tend to balance, right? We've all been like running crazy, 99% profane, 1% sacred. Well, that's naturally rebalancing even right now in the macro world, isn't it? Right? So if you go all in on the sacred and you're like, oh, 99, I just want to like be in my meditative state all day, that's okay because you're receptive to guidance anyway. So when it does come time to like pay your bills and take out the garbage, that guidance will be like, okay, you should probably take a break and go take out the garbage now. Because you're open, you're not tight, right? So whatever guidance you need to do, you can get done. So for me, I tend to be biased. I like to set sacred space first and gorge fully on it, and then let the profound and marketplace sort itself out around me from there. I was not always like that, but I'm like that now, more and more. Because it feels good and it's tended to work. I mean, even in the literal example of the temple, right? What comes first, the temple or the marketplace? Obviously, the temple, right? God comes down, sets down the sort of the stake on where the temple should be. Hindu culture, right? The geomancer comes in and finds sort of the head of I think the world snake, and then the mason needs to like sort of put the first stake and the foundation stone there. There is always the sacred space established first, and then the profanum springs up around it. Right, everyone comes to sell their food and snacks and souvenirs and goats and chickens. Okay. So for me, whatever percentage, if you're going to allow both, I'm like, set the sacred down first, set that up, and then everything else will like, constellate around you, however it needs to do. Um, the other thing, there's all this other stuff I could talk. I want to sort of be respectful of time, but basically, what you will find is that, so an interesting experiment to do is, even with like metaphorically 99% sacred, see how you actually do when you're walking through the profane world, but you yourself are in a state of sacred. Okay. Basically, within you, you are in a state of love, nurturing, and surrender, inner surrender. You still have your Rottweiler in front of you, taking care of business, but he's not in. He's like patrolling, protecting the inner sanctum of you. Okay. And you walk through the world, even through the profane world, and you can just do these little experiments to see how functional you actually are when you are in a state of the sacred. I do this exercise with meditation advisees all the time, where it's like those of you who have taken 0-minute meditation. When you're in the 0-minute state, you will find you are shockingly productive. And you can actually still carry on a meeting while you're meditating. You can actually still cook while you're still meditating. So you don't have to be like this all the time. You can be this, and stuff still kind of gets done. So my only thought there is, even if you are like in the sacred, you can experiment with how functional you actually are. You may find that you are shockingly, surprisingly functional, so that even in those actions you need to do, chores in the profane you need to do, you can do them while you yourself are in the state of the sacred. But that's just kind of a pro tip, something to think about for later. Okay. Hey, Artie, I thought I was better equipped to handle this because I've already put practices in place for nourishment, which have kept me sane and moving ahead. But there are periods when homeschooling, running my business from home, attending to household needs, basically juggling all hats together cripples me. Do I need to say this as a mom? Right? Obviously. This is not a dada. I mean, no offense, right? This is a mom. My anxiety stems from the fact that I don't have control, structure, and a sense of being organized. How do I handle it so that I'm not triggered and it doesn't spiral downwards? Okay. I think we're frozen. Let me do a quick refresh. You guys see me? I just did a refresh. Hopefully you guys can all see me. Okay. All right, thank you. So this question, there are moments when homeschooling, running my business from home, attending to household needs, basically juggling all these hats together cripples me. How do I handle this without being triggered in a spiral downwards? So this to me is a great example, right? So in the profane world, it's like I still have to keep all these things going. In the sacred, you step out to look at the overall pattern. And here's my take on it. You are doing 5 different jobs, right? It's a pandemic, and you are doing 5 different jobs. So for me to take a step back here, first of all, you're awesome. Your family is crazy lucky to have you, and you are doing 5 jobs. So to have this state of affairs but not acknowledge it is not being cool to yourself, right? It's keeping the bar unfairly high as before. It's like, well, I need to homeschool at the same level at which they were at when they were in school. It's like, no, you don't. It's a pandemic, right? So it's really not fair. It is a kind of almost self-cruelty. Um, one of the poems I'm going to read later, if you guys will bear with me, we're past the 2 hour mark now, has this line in it that I want to read to you now. Um, and the line is that I call it cruel, and maybe the root, I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs, but not recognize the fact. I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs and not recognize the fact. Um, so for you to take on 5 jobs in the middle of a pandemic and say, I'm not organized and I'm doing a shitty job, you know, that's unreasonable, and it's cruel to not recognize that. Cruel to yourself. So your homeschooling may suck at times. Your business may falter. The house may be messy for longer to the point where it gets that bit of a funky smell. As a guy and a guy who's lived with guys, I'm very familiar with that funky smell. Um, for me, that's all okay because we're in a pandemic. I mean, I would argue even without the pandemic, it's okay. But now we've got this covered. You already have 5 jobs. You don't need a 6th job, which is basically the job of this inner bitch kind of mother-in-law figure who says everything you do is not good enough. Right? And no offense to mother-in-laws. Some of my best friends are mother-in-laws. And even if you are a mother-in-law, you had your own mother-in-law, you were a daughter-in-law, you know what that's like. Okay, so it's this archetypal kind of figure. So here is the safety check I would give you. For me, it's like when you feel this self-cruelty and you realize you're in the state of self-cruelty, because there's something that's true and you're not recognizing the fact. For me, this is a form of self-threat. So you are in the realm of the profane when you threaten yourself like that. Not good enough, not good enough. You need to be organized. You need, and you spiral down because you're in the profane. When you look at it from the point of view of the sacred, and you just take a bottle of sacred and just pour it on everything, you can see if that makes it any better, right? For instance, love, nurturing, and surrender toward yourself, doing all 5 jobs. And then also, the safety check is to ask yourself if you are getting enough sacred time. You call it sometimes me time or mom time. Are you getting enough sacred time? Again, not just to de-stress, right? I mean, a shot of whiskey will distress you. Watching Netflix will de-stress you. We're not talking about just that. But the larger thing, which is to be in a space with strong boundaries where it's fully devoid of fear, threat, and control, free of threat, free of self-threat, free of self-criticism, and free of self-cruelty. So that has to be that time in the sacred for you. If it's not 1%, figure out what it is. If it's 15, 20%, 20% is a lot when you're doing 5 different jobs. But for my money, if 20% is the minimum viable, that is the temple, that is the thing that gets established first. And the profoundum of homeschooling and cleaning the house and your online business, your business and everything, that all sorts out. All that stuff can fight in the profoundum for the remaining 80% of your budget. Because without the 20% of your sacrum, of your templum, sacred space, I mean, everything else is friggin' pointless anyway. Right? I mean, how are you going to sail your ship without the compass of the sacred? Well, I'll just sail faster. Well, how do you even know you're going in the right direction? So for me, it's the one thing I'll say is like the cut line between sacred and profane is up to you, but very rarely have I seen it work where the sacred is actually 0. I've never seen that work. Maybe it could work, and you can disprove me, but I've never seen it work. Okay. Okay. So, and then in the profane, it's like, If stuff falls lower, then so be it, right? There's all these things, the kids can learn to cook a little. There's Khan Academy, right? If learning at home is homeschooling directly is not viable. The one thing that is kind of not okay, that nothing else works for me unless that works, is that freedom from self-cruelty, that inner sacred space that you have for yourself to recharge and gain that sort of guidance and compass reading. Once you have that compass reading, 80% is plenty to prosecute everything else you need to prosecute, because you have that sharpness of direction. This matters, this doesn't matter. Done. Or we're eating canned food the third night in a row because nobody has time to cook. Done. We're not starving. We're not dying. Right? And you clarify these things for your own self. This pressure and containment then triggers the transformation of you carving out more time for the sacred for yourself, if that is what is the right thing for you. Okay. Okay. So this thing of this question of being infiltrated by fear gremlin, because most of the insights and epiphanies of my life come to me in the shower, which is great, but there are these long downloads of conversations I wish I had in a past traumatic relationship, and this is over, it's done. I know this is just my inner child trying to turn around her experience, and my adult self gets it, but it's like, how do I turn these if only lectures into something that feels more helpful for today? So this is an example of what I'm talking about. You have these showers, you're getting these large downloads, okay? And this is more advanced healing stuff, but I'll just touch on it here. The thing that comes through, you instantly do three things to it. You say, first of all, you name it. It's just my inner child. Secondly, you say, you're doing something that's not useful. Rehashing this old relationship. And the third thing you do is you say, this isn't going to work. How do I make this more valuable? How do I make this into not what you're saying to me, but something else that I think is the right thing? And for me, the dragon that's coming through is like, I think you're not hearing the words that are coming from my mouth, right? What I'm saying is valid. I am a valid part of you, and you need to hear what I have to say. Right? I don't want to get into, people are like, is the way you teach healing, is it inner child? Is it recovery of lost parts? Is it shamanistic? I don't use anybody else's terminology, because when you take on terminology, it is one way of controlling and dismissing this part of you that's trying to come back. Put another way, you don't know that it's an inner child. You just call it that. Right? I'm not saying I know what it is. Right? But if it's a voice that comes to you, you can turn around and ask it, what are you? And it tells you all this other stuff. It will tell you. You can even ask it what its name is. It will tell you her name. And then you can ask, well, why are you rehashing all this? I want stuff that's useful. And she will have an answer for that too. Right? So this is an example of, and here you literally call it, this is my sacred space, and this thing is infiltrating. She's invading my sacred space. It's like, I think it's coming from here. Right? And I don't know that it's a child. And I'm like, just if you want, I'm not finger wagging, but if you want, you can maybe like go talk to it and ask it all these questions. I don't know the answer. But in my past experience, unprofessional, I'm not like pulling the authority card here. In my past experience, I've seen many examples where when you talk to it in a certain way, it will give you not the answers you want to hear, but answers that you realize, okay, just dismissing it is not fair. It's actually cruel. And there are things that I don't want to hear that I need to hear. So those are my thoughts on that. And I hope that was helpful. And thank you for sharing the question. Okay, so these other questions about I'm living with my extended family, it's driving me crazy. So we talked about that in terms of the containment and pressure. Uh, this is like a reverse example. Okay, so here we have a question where what can caregivers or supporters do when they're isolated from the people they support? More specifically, how do I manage the stress of being unavailable? I'm worried about their well-being. I'm guilty for perhaps being in a better position than those I was caring for, right? And so this to me is an example of what we were talking about earlier, where you are in pressure in a cooking pot and you're contained. You can't go out and help the people you are being helped. And the question is, what transformation is this triggering for me? I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying I want this. I'm not saying it should be. But what transformation is it triggering for me? What is being melted? What is being softened? What kidney stone here is being passed in me painfully, but inevitably? Um, and note that I say inevitably, not properly, not justifiably, not all for the best, but inevitably as a pattern. For you sitting alone there, unable to get, you know, your usual inflow and outflow of emotional validation and support and feeling good and everything by helping those people. You're doing real help for them. They do need you, right? They are isolated. They are worse off without you. The help you provide them is real. But one of the things that came to me when I was sitting with this question is that when you're sitting alone there, not able to help the usual people in the outside world you help, there is still someone who needs support and care, and that is you. Um, when you're sitting alone, there's never just one of you. You're never actually alone. There's two of you, at least, right? There's you, and then sort of the you that sees you, right? The you that is cruel to yourself, the you that is criticizing yourself. There's always two. There's always a subject and object when you're sitting alone. And so, if it is hard to redirect that caring, those pastoral energies and powers onto your own self when you're alone, but you're being forced to consider then that may be part of a larger transformation that you're being triggered into. Note, I'm not saying that should happen. I'm not saying, oh, it's good for you. I'm saying I wonder if that's what's happening, and I don't know. I don't know. But this is an example of the real you coming up like grass or dragon up through the concrete. Okay. So here we have three questions. So the first question is, I before the outbreak, I managed to live well in the now, in the present moment. Now I'm looking back in history, what happened in 1918 with the Spanish flu. What were the consequences? I'm in fear. I'm worried about my elderly parents. I'm worried about finances. I'm worried about my kids. My kids are like, this is just going to be over in 2 weeks. And I'm like, I don't think so. But how do I drill that into them without making them totally discouraged? And then also this third question, which is, I am not able to, I know this. She lives in Greece, and they're Greek, right? So she goes into the supermarket with this mask. She can't hug and kiss her friends. She can't smile. Nobody can see her face. And everyone in the supermarket was just in and out, just getting their stuff. So she's like, this is going to change the fabric of society. This is going to change our culture. What's going to happen? So these are the questions that were sort of coming out. So for me, there's a profane level and a sacred level. So the profane level is totally valid. Financial worries, toilet paper, food, money. We do have to figure this stuff out. We do have to get it done. We do have to get the economy fired up again. We do need to keep as many people safe as possible. So that has its own bolus of like logistical cause and effect things that we must and we will figure out together as a people. Then there is the sacred level, right? What is the meaning for me of this pattern of another pandemic outbreak after SARS, after all these other ones, after Spanish flu, and then even after coronavirus, the possibility in the future of another one after that may be even more deadly and vicious, right? So not practically in terms of like reserve medical corps, those are all questions in the profane. They must be answered, and they will be. But also practically in terms of transformation, the deeper question is just, what kind of a birthing is this that we're undergoing as a people? Are we going into the cocoon? Are we coming out as the butterfly? Both are painful. Both involve much pain and cost. Um, and, it is a totally sort of valid question. So when we talk about fear and worrying about your parents, all of these sort of questions, back in the profane, your elderly parents are at risk. You need to do everything you can to protect them. And God forbid, right, if they do get sick or worse, knock on wood, God forbid, that won't happen. Um, there are two questions. The question in the realm of the profane is, how do we take care of them? How do we mourn them properly? How do we make sure that doesn't happen in the first place? How do we save other people? How do we protect your kids as well? But then there is a sacred realm question as well, which is, if all that stuff happens, what is the overall pattern of transformation that your family may undergo? Right? And this is the sacred level question, which means you do not have to ask it. Right? In the profane level, if you don't ask about toilet paper, there's a threat. You better figure this out or else. In the sacred world, you don't have to ask these questions. Okay? If you want to get the guidance, you will ask the larger questions. I'm not saying you have to, because there is no fear, control, and threat in the realm of the sacred. But if you're like, what is the meaning of all this? Then I'm like, the question is, what is the larger pattern that is going on? And if you can see the larger pattern, then maybe you will see the transformation. And this will be the thread that carries you through. And there's a poem that I want to read by Bill Stafford. I was going to read this in the sacred section, but I'll just hit it now really quickly. Bill Stafford, he had this practice. He was a poet, an American poet. And he had this practice where he would wake up in the morning and he wouldn't get out of bed until he had written the poem. Okay. Talk about protecting the sacred. Okay. So Bill Stafford would not get out of bed until he'd written a poem. Good poem, bad poem, sucky poem, doesn't matter. He would write the poem and then he would allow himself to get up, go to the bathroom, brush his teeth, and carry on with the rest of his more profane day. The sacred came first in the day for him. And when he talked about it, he talked about this golden thread, in this image of the thread, and not breaking this thread that's within you, that runs through you, that runs through your life, that runs between you and other people. The importance of not breaking that thread because it comes from the divine. This is the larger question. This is the question of the sacred. And he would say, every morning you get this thread. It comes up out of the dark waters. It's golden. It's provided for you. And what I do when I write a poem in the morning, I try to follow that golden thread as carefully and for as far as I can before I inadvertently, because I'm just immortal, before I inadvertently break the thread. And then I've gone as far as I can go. And then the next morning, I get another thread. Now, if you break the thread, if you lose the opportunity, that's fine. The next morning, you will get another thread. But this is the thread. This is, for those of you who've done labyrinth work, circumambulation, healing work with me, this is the thread of Ariadne through the labyrinth. This is the thing that guides Theseus through. The ball of yarn, golden yarn that she gives Theseus to guide him through the labyrinth is called a clue. It's literally where we get our word clue. When we say get a clue, get that guidance, the thread. And so with that, I want to read you this poem by Bill Stafford, where the title of this poem is The Way It Is. This is just not good or bad. I'm just like I'm talking about the pattern you find. This is the pattern he has discerned in his life. It's just the way it is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change. but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing, and you have to explain about the thread. But it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen. People get hurt or die. And you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. That's it. I'll read it again later, but that basically is the answer, my answer to your question. So with your kids, I don't know. Right? I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to give you, but what I will say is, when my kids ask me these hard questions with no answers, I have built a relationship with them, for better or worse, where I have no problem telling them I don't know, because I don't. I'm not going to lie to them. Right? I say I don't know, but here are the things I'm thinking about. I'm worried about grandma, grandpa. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about finances. I'm worried about all these other things. Not to dump them on you. It's like, no, I'm holding them. I'm the parent. It's my job to figure these things out. But if you're asking me if lockdown is going to be 2 weeks or 2 months, I don't know. I'm thinking maybe 2 months. And you can just, I'm worried about scars you may have. I'm worried about, and your kids will be the ones to tell you, no, I think I can handle that. What are you worried? It looks like you're wearing 5 hats. Let me help with the cooking. Right? That's where those conversations will often end up, because you're just like, your kids witness you go into the sacred. Or instead of you wielding the whip of fear, threat, and control on your kids, which is because you do it on yourself. You do to your kids what you do to yourself, right? When you go to the sacred, you're like, I have love, I have nurturing, and I have surrender. And I'm like, it's not that I'm scared, but I honestly don't know. And here's how I'm thinking about it. Here's the pattern I'm trying to sort through. Here's the pattern I'm trying to, it's almost like you're working at a jigsaw puzzle with stakes, with high stakes, but still it's just another jigsaw puzzle. And after a while, your kids, depending on their age, this becomes a kind of initiation for them into adulthood, where after a while, metaphorically speaking, they start sitting next to you and start handing you pieces and start working out puzzle parts of the puzzle that they can handle, that's age appropriate. They know what's age appropriate for them. Right? Some kids are cooking for the family when they're 9. Some kids are 59 and they still can't, open a can of beans. Right? Everybody's different. Everybody's different. So for you, your specific question, it's just like that conversation we had in Rome about that thing we were talking about at the Rome retreat, where I was like, you can just tell them you don't know, but you're scared, and here are the things you're thinking about. And what did he do? He took the ball and he ran with it. And he came back and told you what to do, right? And this is potentially one of those things, if you feel it is a match and it feels like the right thing for you to do. But those are kind of the brainstorm things that I come up with when I think about that question. Okay, so we're at the 2.5 hour mark. And what I want to do at this point, hopefully you can all see me and hear me. Gary, can you see me and hear me? Uh-oh, I think I might be frozen. I'm going to just refresh. Okay, so I'm back. Hopefully everyone can see me. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So those were all the questions that I had prepared for this session. If you have additional questions, follow-on questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up this link, and you'll get this. I'll email this out to everyone. A link to the sign-up link for the next Sacred Space session. We'll do it next Sunday. And if you have follow-on questions, you can post them there. Generally, as a rule, there's too many questions for me to answer individually. And what I'll do is I'll just select a few and just try to hit all the major themes that all the questions have raised. So even if I don't answer your specific question, even if you didn't have a question, I would always recommend watching the entire session, because I'll hit on things, dots will connect in your mind, insights will come to you that I couldn't have anticipated, you couldn't have anticipated, but somehow magically will come up during these sacred space sessions. Because we're all holding the sacred space for each other and for ourselves. This is the time. This is like a long 2.5-hour shower, right? We're all kind of showering together with our bathing suits on. It's totally appropriate. But the channel is open for us to receive guidance. So I'm the only one talking, for control of just the order of the session, but you're all getting download, right, in your own way. So you can journal, you can make notes, questions you may want to ask later. So I welcome and invite you all to do that. Okay, so for the second to last part of this, I wanted to talk about a number of ways to get into sacred space in a zone of insight and reflection as a group. Okay, so obviously we're doing this now. Hopefully this feels good for you and you feel the power of the sacred space that we're in together. There are other ways. And so for those of you who are healers and who are facilitators for your own groups on Zoom or elsewhere, I'll just name them, right, just to get the juices flowing. Group meditation, guided poetry, which I'll do in a couple of examples of here with Bill Stafford's poems. Dreams and dream reading, fairy tales, work with the labyrinth. So in future sessions, if you like, I'd be happy to go into a bit into any or all of these. That can be like our activity for future sessions. Like we'll do a little bit of Q&A and then we'll do a sacred space exercise, okay? So question section is done. Now let's do our sacred space group sacred space exercise. So what I suggest we do, what I'd like to do today, and if you like, you can stay with me on this, is to have a poem. And the poet I've selected for today is Bill Stafford, William Stafford. He's a fantastic American poet. He was born in 1914, died in the early 90s. And this is my own take on him. And I hope this won't come out the wrong way. But when you looked at him, he was just this gray-haired, tweed jacket, professorial, bushy gray eyebrows, kind of just guy. Like if you've ever seen Joseph Campbell, like his look and demeanor, Bill Stafford looked like he could be Joseph Campbell's cousin, right? So this regular, all-American kind of professorial white guy, Caucasian guy, right? Professor, poet, given all these awards and everything. But actually, in reality, his ethnic makeup was, I think, 1/3 Native American. I think he was Lakota. And he has spoken to this. People who have been close to him have spoken to this element of. I'm not his biographer, so I'm just giving it to you as I've heard it, as it was told to me. This element of the Lakota side of him, comes through in all of his poetry in this just unspeakable, beautiful way. The thread poem that I just read, that's a Bill Stafford poem. And he had this sacred practice where he would not get out of bed in the morning until he had written a poem. And there's this image of the golden thread offered to you every morning. And if you choose, again, it's sacred, so it's only if you want. There's no threat. Right? Most of us, we get out of bed, we start looking at our phones, and the thread breaks like that. Now, the way I said that, I'm not saying this. It's like you can break the thread as many times as you want because it's from the sacred. Tomorrow morning, you will get another one. You will get another one. Okay, so there's no fear, threat, or control. Right? You break all the golden threads every morning, all throughout the day, as much as you want. You will get more. There is no scarcity because we intrinsically are creators. We are not slaves. Okay. So he every morning, because he felt this, he would be like, well, I'm a poet. I'm not a plumber. I'm not an investment banker. I'm not a stockbroker. I'm a poet. So like, I have one job. My one job is like pick up this thread and like follow it as far as I can. So since it gets delivered in the morning and I wake up in the morning, I'm not friggin' gonna do anything else until I follow this thread. He wrote a poem every morning before he got out of bed. Only about 3,000 of them ever got published. The rest, like 20, 22,000, they're all in books in a library somewhere in the archives. And this is what he did. So there are two poems I want to read about this motif of the thread. The first one I've already read, and I'll read it one more time. And then the second poem, I'll read it in sort of full sacred space style, the way I do it, which is I'll read it the first time and I'll just like put all my own commentary and explanation into it. So you get all the juice out of the content and meaning and purpose of the poem, even stuff that I'm injecting in there that Bill Stafford probably didn't have any intention. But I read the poem as I read a dream. I put my own sort of wild ass intuition into it. And then I read it again straight with no commentary, so you get the full force with everything I just told you. Okay. So the first poem is The Way It Is. It's this poem about the thread. And I've already read it once, so I'll just read it one more time. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing, and you have to explain about the thread, but it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. That's Bill Stafford. So there's a second poem of Bill Stafford's that I want to read to you. And this is infused with the image of the same thread. But here, it's not the thread running through your own life. Here, it's the thread that runs among us and between us as a people. And the importance of attending to this thread that runs from your heart to mine, to make sure that that doesn't break between us. And all these images are just brilliant and beautiful. And to me, this poem is all about the thread. So I'm going to read it twice. The first time I'm going to read it and give you all my Artie commentary, and then I'll read it again straight so you get the full feeling of it. So this poem by William Stafford is called A Ritual to Read to Each Other. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made, and for me it's a profane pattern, not a sacred pattern, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world. And following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. For there is many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break. And to that earlier questioner, not to pick on you, we all do this, I do this too. You know, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break. Oh yeah, this was coming to me in the shower. It's not valid, it's just my inner child. It's invading my sacred space. How do I get rid of it and get the real signal? It's like, that is the real signal. That is the real signal. You may not understand it, you may not want to hear it, but that is the real signal. So for there is many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break. sending with shouts the horrible errors of childhood, storming out to play through the broken dike. So when you do that and you break the sequence, all the wounds of childhood, like, come barfing out of you in toxicity. A shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending with shouts the horrible errors of childhood, storming out to play through the broken dike. When the dike breaks, the whole town is flooded. And as elephants parade, holding each elephant's tail. So when Bill was a child, this is in, I think, Iowa or someplace in that part of the country. In the 20s and 30s, the circus would come to town. And the way they would market the circus is they would parade the elephants in a line, and each elephant's trunk would hold the tail of the elephant in front of it. And they would parade through the town, go into the central park of the town, and then they would set up the tents, and everyone would know the circus had come to town. And he says here, and as elephants parade, holding each elephant's tail. But if one wanders, the circus won't find the park. I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs but not recognize the fact. This is the line that I read earlier, where you know you did this and you stuffed down your inner child. You know that you're not being fair to the other person. You know that you've broken the line with the other elephants, and you just don't say anything. You just let the whole thing train wreck. I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs but not recognize the fact. And so I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. And that's all of us. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark. For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line, again, this image of the breaking line, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. I'll read that part again. For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no, or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep. That's it. So now, with all that commentary loaded of the importance of not letting this thread break among us or even within us. And to me, it is the thread of sacredness, of sacred space, of the direction it gives us. I'll read this poem one more time, without commentary, so you get the full flow of it, and then I'll move to close the session. This is A Ritual to Read to Each Other by William Stafford. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world. And following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. For there is many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending with shouts the horrible errors of childhood, storming out to play through the broken dike. And as elephants parade, holding each elephant's tail. But if one wanders, the circus won't find the park. I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs but not recognize the fact. And so I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark. For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no, or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep. Thank you. Okay. So that is poetry in sacred space. Okay, so we're at 2:45, and I can go on all day, right? But we all have stuff to do, so I'm going to close out the session. And I'll say that the next session is this Sunday, just 4 days away. It's free, it's open. Please feel free to invite others. No commerce. If you have questions and thoughts coming out of the session, please post them into the question section of the next session. And that's where I'll do my prep and review for the next session. Those of you on email, I'll blast out the email. I'll put on Facebook all the links for the next session. Okay, so with this, I will hereby close this session of our shared sacred space. Thank you so much for holding this space with me. And I thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment. Let this plane pass. I'm usually annoyed by these, mechanical interruptions, but at this point, I'm just so thrilled to have any sign of economic activity around me. I'm just like planes, jackhammers. Yeah, bring it, bring it. All right. So I hereby close this session of our shared sacred space. Thank you for holding the space with me. Thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment, the spiritual nourishment of this shared sacred space with me. I am nourished when I'm here with you as well, and I thank you for being here. And I will just say, go in peace. I give you my blessing. By whatever authority you feel I have to give you my blessing. In other words, if you accept my blessing, then I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, free of fear, free of threat, and free of the undue control of others. Have a great day. Have a great week. And I will see you all in the next session. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.